Hey guys, so we went over my Titan build and my gear, and I do also have a Warlock. Hello. But I also have my friend Lucifer here. He's going to show us his gear and his setup for Prison of Elders and PvP and stuff because he plays Warlock much more than I do. But we are going to go over my gear since I know people like to know what I'm using. We can ignore the weapons because, they're basically going to be the same thing that I used for my Titan. My Warlock does not change my weapon loadout really at all, and nor would a Hunter. That doesn't change really anything. Over for my gear, I'm using the Ram because it's just a very solid overall helm for basically everything. We have some Kelbreakers, and Talion Grace. These are some PvP boots just with a good stat roll. I haven't really had the time to go kind of build up a collection of gear that would allow me to use what I think is the ideal for something like PvE or Prison of Elders or, whatever. So right now I'm just kind of in a state where I have a very good stat allocation. It's not optimal. I am heavy in discipline, which is good. I'm a little too heavy in strength, which is not the worst because Warlocks do actually benefit from strength a little bit more than Titans do due to its reach. And I'm a little light on the intellect. I would like to bump this up, but unfortunately full strength gloves kind of make that a problem. If I could switch these over to intellect or intellect discipline even, I would be quite happy with that, and this is kind of the build that I use for Prison of Elders. But we're going to go over to Lucifer now. Hey, buddy.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. So let's take a look at your gear here. You also use the Ram, probably for similar reasons.
Yeah,
that I do.
That armor boost is definitely a good thing to have when you're doing the in-game content.
Yeah. So Sunsinger seems to very much be flavor of the expansion. And I think the reason why is because enemies don't really clump up as much, which the Voidwalker really takes advantage of. In Crota's End, especially in the Abyss section, you saw a lot of Voidwalkers because Nova Bomb and something like Obsidian Mind was so potent that you could basically have a Nova Bomb at every single lamp. Bloom also helped this fact. It just chained everything. You could just blow everything up instantly. The reason why Voidwalker maybe isn't used as much now is because its damage against mages really isn't that great, and because enemies don't really clump up as much as they did in Crota's End as they do in Prison of Elders. Things generally kind of spread out, and you can't really maximize the potential of Voidwalker as much as you can Sunsinger, which can just go around flinging nades. Maybe you might get lucky and get 4 or 5 minor enemies in a Nova Bomb, but that's nothing you couldn't do with something like Radiance, where you just chuck a whole bunch of Firebolt grenades and everything's dying around you anyway. Plus, you have the freedom of throwing multiple grenades. So, I know a lot of people were wondering why a lot of people use Sunsinger in PvE now. Obviously, Fireborn is a very, very large benefit as well, but I think it's mainly the power of Radiance in that it's slightly better and maybe more of a consistent experience over something like Voidwalker. But if someone did want to roll with a Voidwalker build, what advice would you have for them?
Definitely have Bloom on. I think one of the big strengths of the Voidwalker is mobility and being able to clear crowds of enemies. So, having Axiom Bolt and Bloom and Nova Bomb, just be able to trash all the little guys is definitely something that could benefit your team.
Yeah, so basically the same reason why you wanted to use it in Crota's End is so you could get that kind of chain damage or that explosive damage if you really wanted to. You could argue that that an energy drain build would work all right as well for a lot of pumping out of grenades, but there's not really a special Voidwalker specific build that I don't think anyone would really be going for in Prison of Elders. So let's move over to your gear now, and we have the Ram, Kelbreakers, and then VOG gear. Now, is this VOG gear just so you can get some very good stat setups, or is there a personal preference, or what's up with that?
Yeah, I am using the VOG gear because it's got great stats on it, and when I'm doing a build, I try and prioritize stats above perks a lot of the time, especially on things like chest pieces and boots, because you're going to get that heavy ammo either way. You're usually going to get that special ammo either way, and things like increased primary ammo aren't really a big deal in PvP because you're just not running out of primary ammo.
Right. Or for PvE as well. There's only a handful of times where I really run out of hand cannon ammo, and that's something like on one of the giant server bosses, and it's small arms or something like that.
Definitely.
So Your stat allocations are great. You're only 2 above the discipline cap, which is awesome. You have 89% current effect intellect. That's great. You have a little bit of strength because of the RAM, but having 0 strength is not always great. Having some strength is pretty good. So this is the kind of overall build that you kind of go for. You don't really, I guess, place a ton of value in those Prison of Elders bonuses. I guess maybe because swapping all the gear around a lot of the times, I mentioned this in the Titan video, can kind of cumbersome and just it gets monotonous, and it's not really a deal breaker if you don't have the bonuses anyway.
Definitely.
So do you change anything for Skolas or the level 35, or do you roll typically with this as well?
Yeah, when you get into the level 35, those gear bonuses do make a little more of a difference, Skolas in particular. And since I'm already running the RAM with Radiant Skin and Flame Shield and Max Armor, I've really kind of got an emphasis on that armor. And so I'll put on the Prison of Elders chest piece and make sure I've got on Prison of Elders gloves to go along with it. Those just give you a little bit of a boost like we were just talking about, but every little bit helps, so I go for the increased armor.
Yeah, increased armor plus RAM plus a full armor build. That's, plus Radiant Skin, you're going to be very, very tanky. Speaking of Radiant Skin, let's go into your build, and this looks like a pretty familiar setup. We're rolling with Fusion Grenades, Focused Burst, Radiant Skin, Flame Shield, Arcane Force, and Divine Order, and we have Radiant Will and Gift of the Sun. This is a pretty solid PvE build if you're running with Fusion Grenades. Something like Firebolt Grenade might run a Touch of Flame Viking Funeral build, but Gift of the Sun plus Fusion Grenades a lot of the time is going to enable you to put a lot of burst damage on a major target, or even just a boss. And it's definitely much better for single target damage as opposed to something like Firebolt Grenade, which is going to spread the love a little bit more. Maybe use those against any sort of rounds that are going to have a lot of minor enemies, or maybe something like in the Hive section where you have a bunch of Thrall running at you or something like that. But then for bosses or anything with a lot of major targets, Fusion Grenade is definitely going to be a little bit better. Anything I missed there?
No, definitely. If you want to do crowd control, put on Firebolts. If you're trying to go for a single target like a major or boss, put on Fusion.
Right. So you are using Radiant Skin. A lot of people love using Fireborn. Obviously, that's a huge perk to have in PvE. Coming back from the dead, that's pretty useful. We don't really utilize it that much. It's just kind of personal preference for us. I also use Radiant Skin. Radiant Skin is probably the best one. Song of Flame is pretty good too. But there's not too many situations where you can set it up and it's more beneficial to do some sort of Song of Flame kind of style scenario as opposed to something like Radiant Skin, which is just going to keep you alive. Flame Shield, obviously that's pretty much the default. The others are not nearly as good. Radiant Will, good. And Gift of the Sun, great. So let's swap over to PvP now.
Okay.
And, weapons are everyone's going to be they're going to be using their personal preferences. And so let's take a look at your PvP setup here. You're a little bit heavier in the strength now, which is not a bad decision. Dropping some of that discipline and some of that intellect for some more strength. We have your typical Thorn, Fellwinter's, Radagast with grenades and horseshoes, and Clown Cartridge. This is the super try-hard mode build that pretty much everyone uses. Should not be any much of a surprise. I know you like using Bad Juju in case you want to use something else. Your Bad Juju has Arc on it. Let's fix that before the comments go insane. There we go. So, yeah, this is a pretty typical weapon setup. For your gear, we have the RAM, once again, very, very good. Unity Clad, and then double VOG in the chest and the legs. Basically, I guess you only change your gloves for that hand cannon reload speed bonus and the increased melee attack speed. Incredibly nice bonuses to have in PvP. Not as urgent in PvE, but definitely. For PvP, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to go for something that's going to do something for my grenades when I'm in high-level PvE, because I'm not running around meleeing majors, but when you get into a PvP sort of combat area, you're definitely going to want to swap that up.
Right. And let's go over to your build. And
a couple things around real quick.
Let's do a little swapperoo. And this should not be much of a surprise to anybody. running Firebolt Grenade, Focus Burst, Radiant Skin, Flame Shield, Arcane Voice, and Divine Order. I like to Arcane Spirit personally. I like having full recovery and full toughness. And then we have a Viking Funeral, Touch of Flame build. That should not come as a surprise to anybody. I personally like Touch of Flame more than Gift of the Sun because typically when you're attacked by any sort of bolt grenade in PvP, your first instinct is to run away very far. And when you have Gift of the Sun, it's like, yeah, it's nice you can tag them for 122, but then if you try and take advantage of them still being in the same spot, typically they're going to run away. So having something like Touch of Flame allows you to track them. It halts their health recovery as well, and generally can bring down most targets, even if they have half shields and full health. You'll still be able to take them down, and it's great for trials. Absolutely fantastic build. I don't think I missed anything there. Fireborn, Radiant Skin Fireborn also comes down to personal preference. For trials, you can also use Fireborn. We use Radiant Skin, but it just comes down to personal preference. Do you change anything? I guess you go Fireborn,
yeah,
maybe.
I mean, in trials, I'm probably going to switch to Fireborn. I might switch up a little bit of my gear, definitely putting on the try-hard pants and probably coming out with Thorn or one of the exotic hand cannons. And, if it calls for it, I can throw on a Light Beyond Nemesis just for the increased revive.
Right.
But,
Which is nice to have on a
much is
team.
going to change. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I didn't imagine much was going to change. Typically, for trials, you're going to be running the same build. The only major change I really tend to see is the fast revive on a lot of people, mainly on Hunters and Warlocks. Titans, I see a lot of Armamentarium, but Crest is not too bad for Titans either. But we're not talking about Titans, we're talking about Warlocks. The only thing that I do differently is sometimes I'll roll with the Ram, sometimes I'll change my thing up to actually Voidfang Vestments to absolutely guarantee that I will have a grenade every single round. That's the nice thing about Voidfang Vestments. Even if you're not Voidwalker, they're still really good for that grenade energy, but my stat allocation is not exactly fantastic. I'm very, very heavy into strength. Discipline doesn't matter as much since you are getting it back every round, and typically you're only throwing one or two every series. But
yeah, and
otherwise,
it's not at the beginning of each round either. It's if you get downed and
right,
get
if you come
revived
back
by your
up.
teammates, yeah,
Right.
and that comboed up with Gift of the Sun. If you're using something like Firebolt grenades, 2 Firebolt grenades can clear a team.
Oh yeah.
And if you're coming up with that every single time, it's a major pain to deal with for people who know how to use it right.
Right. I just I don't have the best stat allocation that we can see. Strength here, strength on the Void Fangs. So these gloves would need to be changed up for this to be slightly more viable. Anyway, so that's basically everything I wanted to cover. Is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, not really. I think it's just kind of at a state right now with the Warlock Exotics where there's lots of different things you can go with. We didn't really mention Heart of the Praxic Fire or Claws of Ahamkara or really any of the Voidwalker stuff. And the thing is, there's a lot of options to choose from, so just pick something that works well with your playstyle.
Yeah, what's nice and kind of not nice about the Sunsinger Exotics is that none of them are an absolute pick. None of them are just, you need to have this. So that's good because a lot of people have, choices for whatever they want to use, but at the same time, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because none of them are super amazing. Whereas with the Voidwalker, you have a little more flexibility. A lot of them are pretty good, but they do one thing very, very well, whereas the Sunsinger Exotics are maybe a little more well-rounded. Something like Claws of Ahamkara focus completely on your melee game, which is great for Warlocks. But you do have options there, but generally the Ram is pretty widely considered as a very top-tier helm, just in general for PP, and slightly for PvE. You can get away with it, or without having it in PvE, and people are not going to bug you. But that's going to do it. Thank you guys very much for watching. To Lucifer, thanks very much for helping out, buddy.
Thank you. Take it easy, guys.
And thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.